is I record these so that we can share these webinars with as many people as possible. It's always public right on our website. And you were just giving some really valuable information that people should hear about. I know you're not going to be with us for the whole webinar, unless you want to. Of course, you're welcome to. But for the backstory, I'm recording this now. For the backstory, the people that didn't hear David before, he was serving a 24-month sentence. He spent about 7 months in prison and 9 months, you said, on home confinement. Is that right, David?
Correct. Yep. 9 months on home confinement with an ankle bracelet on my left leg.
And then you had, I was just asking him, and today's a very big day for him because he's just taking the ankle bracelet off and he's going on to transition into supervised release. But I just asked a question of David to tell us about what was the experience like when you were on home confinement. Did you have a good level of liberty?
Yeah, I had a very good level of liberty. I was told basically, hey, stay in my lane, make sure I'm home by 9 o'clock every night, and call whenever I have to leave. I'm in real estate, so I go look at houses all over the state of Illinois, and I would leave and go to like church meetings, go play pickleball, go look at houses, and I get up early. No one else is usually getting up early, so they know I'm not doing anything, rowdy or anything. And I was always home by 9 unless my kids had like a sporting event, and I always let them know way ahead of time, here's my kids' sports schedule. I won't be home by 9 at this time, because they have somebody there at the halfway house that would call me on my home line to make sure I'm home. That's just part of their due diligence since they're outsourced. And so because of the picture I painted when I got in, when I got released from Lexington Federal Prison, I had to drive all the way 6 hours to Peoria. Maybe it was 8 hours. And anyway, the first question they asked me was, do you have a job? And because of all the groundwork that I laid, I had a job right out of prison, and I could tell them this is what I plan on doing. And immediately the person's demeanor changed to where it was like, hey, you're some scumbucket, to where like, you actually have a brain on your head, don't you? So that's kind of how it started. I made a very good first impression, but it was because of all the groundwork beforehand and I was able to make that positive first impression. Hope that made sense.
No, it completely made sense. And in fact, there was you'd gotten a question while we were waiting there from Rob, who said he thought that home confinement you couldn't leave your house, and Scott was kind enough to respond to him in the chat. Thanks, Scott, for doing that, by the way. But as you can hear, Rob, if you could hear Rob, what Dave is telling you is if you lay the groundwork well, you can position yourself for a better outcome all the way through the journey. The challenge that a lot of people have, and Dave, you could speak to this, is they just don't do the groundwork. They don't do the preparation before they go to prison, and they end up having problems that complicate things. And that's what we're going to be talking about on today's webinar. Once we start, it's only 8:30 in California right now. We'll start. I'll give it another 2 minutes. But that's something that David just said. He was prepared and he sowed a lot of seeds. And because of that, we're celebrating today that he cut off his ankle bracelet and he's going on to live a life of meaning and relevance and fulfillment. You were speaking about your preparations and maybe what you saw other people not preparing. Could you elaborate a little more on that for the people that are brand new on the or just getting ready to go into the system, David?
Yeah. So one thing I did was I set up through you guys a blog, so that way I could have like a track record and proof of my track record throughout my journey while I was locked up in prison in Lexington, Kentucky. And that helped me show the type of person I am. Nobody else. I was in the facility with over 1,300 other inmates, and there was not one other person that was doing what I was doing. So when I would go meet with my case manager there at Lexington saying, hey, when can we start the process to get me out? I've been really keeping up on my blog, really trying to walk my talk, let my faith show. They had actual proof, not just me telling them. They could show that I truly did walk it on out. And it also helped that I got a job right away at the factory there in the financial office. And I made sure that my boss, he had nothing but great things to say. I never gave anybody a reason to say anything bad about me. And there's always ways to get in trouble there, and the guards will bait you to get in trouble because they want to take your good time credit away. They want to take your earned time credit away because that's how they get paid. They get paid by having repeat customers come into the BOP, unfortunately.
Well, one thing I'm going to put on the screen, I'm about ready to start the webinar, David, but before I do, I just want to, I've got on the screen right now that picture that you just shared with me so that people can see it. That's what the ankle monitor looks like right there. Yep. And that is a very happy day that people are going to get to celebrate cutting that thing off and holding it up and say, wow, I'm done with the BOP right now. And now I'm going on to this new transition of where I'm going to go through supervised release and celebrate a successful journey through that as well. So David, thanks so much for sharing that story. He's driving right now, and he just happened to share that image with me. So I wanted to share it with the group because I know that people who are on our webinar are going through some challenging times of going into the criminal justice system. And sometimes it can feel like, wow, this is going to just completely destroy my life. But we're hearing from a guy, and we've got also Scott on the call today, who was in the same position you were in at one point, facing a really difficult time of going into the criminal justice system and thinking of all of the ways this is influencing your life. Our job is to help you get an outcome like both Scott had, and you'll hear about Scott through the webinar, and that David had. To recap what David had, he had a 24-month sentence. He got out after 7 months. He did 9 months or so on home confinement. He had liberty to run his business and build his life. And today we're celebrating because he got that ankle break cut off and he transitions into supervised release. And I have no doubt that we will also be celebrating David's early termination of supervised release because of all the work that he did before and the work that he is continuing to do. So these are things that we have to celebrate. Scott had a similar experience where, Scott, your sentence was 42 months. Is that right?
That's correct.
42. Yeah. And you served how much?
13 and a half.
And then he was home, and he's on you're on home confinement now, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And I'm really excited because Scott's going to really start working with our team. And, and maybe that's something that all of you can do at some point. We're trying to be the change that we want to see in the world and help people who are justice impacted get the best possible experience. And in our previous webinar last week, we spoke a lot about the importance of you sowing seeds that are going to influence what goes forward in your life. How are you coming out? Are you coming out better, or are you coming out with more complications? A lot of that starts with your willingness to prepare. And as I do all of the time, I create these kind of resources that I want to share with you so that you know where to go and look. On our website by the end of the day today, you will see on this, if you go to this blog, you will see this article where I am using to kind of guide me through this webinar. And today we're going to be talking about disciplinary infractions. And I'll go through this series of slides, but by the end of the day, there will be this video recording that will also show up here. If it's easier for you to listen on iTunes while you're driving, then feel free to do that. But one thing I want to really emphasize is you've got to show up in the sense of saying, I am going to do everything I possibly can to prepare. And to make that commitment really starts with understanding what what are the things that I need to know before I go to prison? And I won't be in prison with you. And there's no way, I was in prison for 26 years. There's no way I can teach you everything I learned during 26 years of prison, during an hour to 90-minute webinar. I'm going to respond to any questions that anybody has. I'm going to share the really important things I think you need to be learning before you surrender. If you were available during the pre-call with David, you heard I asked him about disciplinary codes. Did you know anybody that had some? And he responded that he did. My guess is that every one of you is going forward with this assumption, I'm not going to get in any trouble while I'm in prison, so I really don't need to know about the disciplinary infraction system. The challenge with that mindset is that you don't understand prison right now, right? Prison, there are things that are in prison that are very different from anything you've experienced. You've never before had to live apart from the people you love and the people who love you. You've never had these complications of not being able to use the phone or when you want, or send an email when you want. You've never had the complication of not being able to eat what you want, or even separate yourself from people that you don't want to be around. Okay. But that's prison. And when you're inside of that environment, sometimes things happen that you get involved in, that it puts you in a higher likelihood of getting into trouble. Obviously, if you are breaking rules like drinking or smoking or fighting, right? Those are obvious. You know that's going to make you vulnerable to a disciplinary infraction. But there are things that happen in prison that are beyond your control, and you still get wrapped up into either an investigation or what's called a disciplinary infraction. And my job is to make sure I've done everything I possibly can to help you understand what do you need to know before you surrender to prison. What do you need to know? And one thing I think that is very, very important is to know about the disciplinary code. And if the more you know before you surrender, the better off you're going to be. So I'm going to go back to the slide right now because I have some things that I want to share with you on that slide that will show you where do you go to learn about the disciplinary code. So let me just turn back to the slide because I have a link on there. On this slide, which is going to be, well, it's really available already today on the blog section of our website, you will see two links. And one of those links is going to take you directly to the Bureau of Prisons disciplinary program. And it's a rather extensive policy statement, but it's very important, in my view, for you to learn from that policy statement. Because if you don't learn from that policy statement, you don't even know where your risks are. You don't even know where can I go wrong or what can I do to avoid these types of complications. So I'm going to get through this slide here and I'll actually show you the disciplinary infraction, but I also want you to have an understanding that there's a possibility through no fault of your own, a lieutenant or a correctional officer may charge you with an infraction. And so if that happens, I need you to know what to do. I need you to know what's coming. How will the Bureau of Prisons respond? How can you respond? But the best time to prepare is before you get there. You should be reading the disciplinary code. So you say, okay, what are the different series of infractions mean? What is the language? Like if they say, I'm giving you a shot, you need to know what that means. So you need to know what's going on around this environment. That way you can be more effective at holding yourself accountable. You also need to know why little tiny things can have an enormous influence on your life. David got out from a 24-month sentence, he said, in 7 months. Scott got out from a 42-month sentence in only 12 months or 13 months. All of that happened because they were very effective at navigating the labyrinthine conditions of the Bureau of Prisons. They knew where to step, where to go, how to avoid things. They knew how to prepare themselves in ways that made it less likely for them to get an infraction. But making it less likely to get an infraction doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to get an infraction. You know, it's very important to understand that the Bureau of Prisons is a huge bureaucracy with many complications. And I want you to figure these things out before you get there. And let me see if I could pull up I'm going to pull up the disciplinary infraction, but I'm getting this. Let me go to the bop.gov website, and I'll show you where to get it. So, policy statement 5270. Let's see. Visiting disciplinary code. I'm struggling right now looking on the BOP's website where to find it, so we can do that together. I will share my screen with you so you know what I am doing, because this is a really great resource for you to find information. Let me see if I can find disciplinary, DISCI, disciplinary code. If you can see my screen right there under FSA. Well, one way you could find it, let me go back, BOP, resources, policy statements and forms, all BOP policies, disciplinary, DIS, discipline, inmate discipline program. It's 527.09. So if you click that program statement right there, you're going to get, and I'll have a link to it on the website today, but you could see, oh no, you can't see because I got to share this screen. Let me share the right screen now. Share my screen. You can go through this document and read everything that the staff members are going to use to enforce this code. So this is program statement number 5270.09. And I really think it would be in your best interest to spend some time reading through this program statement, because this is what staff members are going to use if they choose to issue a disciplinary infraction against you. And you may say, well, I'm not going to do anything wrong. Why do I need to know that? In order to answer that question, you got to go back to one of the things that I suggested in the previous webinar. You've got to start off by thinking about where I'm going and who are the people that work there. So when you're driving around or you're thinking about the Bureau of Prisons, I want you to think about who grows up or who says, I'm going to spend my career working inside of a prison. What is that person's mindset? And how does that person define success? It's very important for you to think about these, ask those kinds of questions before you go, because it's going to temper your tendency sometimes to contest the system, right? It's a very big machine. Those people that work in the machine, they want to keep the machine going. Your job is not to be concerned with the machine, but to get home to your family as soon as you possibly can. And so that means I want you to start by thinking about what is success for you when you're going in there. It is not contingent on what somebody else does. Success for you when you go in there is to say, how are you going to get home at the soonest possible time? What can you do? And then say, what is your plan? For those of you who are listening to David earlier, he walked in and he had a plan. When you hear more from Scott, you will hear he had a plan. He knew what success was going to look like for him before he got there. And then because he had that plan, he was able to put priorities in place and figure out, okay, what do I have to do first? David said before he surrendered, he'd already set up this kind of personal accountability system where he was documenting his journey. And of course, Scott did the same thing. And they will free it up to talk with you about how it helped them through their journey. But one thing I can say is because they had a plan, they were less susceptible to be tempted into those kinds of discussions or those types of decisions that can bring them closer to a disciplinary infraction. A disciplinary infraction can totally disrupt your life in there, and it can happen to anybody. But if you've got a plan and you've got this thing that says, I know what I'm going to do every day, I know how I'm going to get through this journey, you are going to be in a far better position to avoid these problems that make things harder for you. And you've got to be thinking about that plan both in the long term, and when I say the long term, longer than a year out, and the short term. What are you doing this year, and how do your decisions today influence that? Scott, you did the same thing as David. Talk about your experience in there in documenting and memorializing your journey. You're on mute, by the way. If you get unmute. Yeah.
I think one of the big benefits for me of memorializing the journey, and I was very diligent at it, was thinking, okay, you have this chance, and if you make this decision and things go bad, you need to write about that. You need to hold yourself accountable. And one of the things that I didn't anticipate regarding disciplinary infractions, you put so many people in such a close space, trouble will find you. There will be opportunities almost daily to make bad decisions. And unfortunately, you can't make good decisions 99% of the time. You need to do it 100% of the time. And constantly writing about what I was trying to do, trying to build this positive record, it influenced me in that it just inspired me to keep making good decisions, to keep working away on the journey.
Yeah. And that journey, unfortunately, is really for the rest of your life. If you, right now, we're celebrating David's cutting off his ankle bracelet, and he's done with the Bureau of Prisons, but he's not done with the system. He's going to have to get off of supervised release early. Not only is he going to have to get off supervised release early, but he's going to spend the rest of his life with this record against him. And so his job is going to be to say, I got to keep memorializing the journey so that I don't have other complications, because collateral consequences follow for people with a criminal background. Sometimes your bank will say, we're going to ask that you move all of your money out of our bank and send it someplace else. That's a complication. But the more you develop your plan, you're in a better position to overcome those complications. That's why we make this commitment that says, we're going to be with you all the way through this journey until you're done with supervised release. We're going to encourage you to learn as much as you can and say, what levers can I pull to put myself in the best position? But if you get a disciplinary infraction while you're in prison, I'm not going to say everything's over and there's nothing you can't do anymore, but I am going to say there are decisions that you could make today that will make it less likely for you to get a disciplinary infraction in prison. And I think that one of the best things that you could do is listen to what Scott just said, and that's create this plan and document your story, because it's going to keep top of mind. Wait a minute. My job is not to do anything of what's going on with the prison community, because trouble will find you. There will be things. And even if you don't do anything wrong, trouble can find you just by being in an environment. For example, you're not going to be alone. You're going to be in a cramped environment, and there's going to be somebody sharing a bunk with you. There's a very good likelihood that you will not have a single bunk. Okay. So David, for example, did you have a private cell? Were you alone, or did you have to share your sleeping environment with somebody else if you're still on the webinar?
I had 6 total people in the room, including myself. And then across the room that we shared the bathroom with, there was another 6 people. It was definitely cramped quarters, even during COVID, where you're supposed to have social distancing. They don't care about that.
And Scott, did you have a private cell, or were you alone?
Private cell. That's got a real great ring to it, huh? No, there was 8 people with me, and there was little privacy, but I did enjoy their company. I'll say that.
Okay, so there's a lesson here, because you can decide what you're going to do, but you can't make decisions for what those other 7 people are going to do, or the other people around you. And if one of those person does something wrong, there's a series of collateral events that take place. And the more you understand that, the more you can build a defense mechanism to protect yourself. Now, I want you to know I see the chat that's coming up, and please continue to ask those questions. Scott, feel free to respond to anybody. Like I said, Lawrence just asked a question.
Sure.
But please go ahead and answer questions, or just unmute yourself and we can talk about these things as we go. I just typically on these webinars, I go through this series of prepared presentations, but I'm always available to answer questions. And at the end of the webinar, I always open it up for questions. But anytime somebody wants to ask, either drop it into the chat and somebody on the team will respond to it. I think that Sam and my other partners are not here today, but Scott's available. So, but feel free to just unmute yourself and I'll respond. The only reason I've got people muted is so for the recording. But
Mike, I got a question.
Okay.
And how you doing? How's everyone doing? I just
Joseph,
know,
Joseph, we're always so happy for you when we see you on the webinar, because you had such a great outcome. For those who don't know, give them your experience and your outcome, what you were expecting in your outcome, where you are now.
So I found out I was part of an investigation by the SEC and then by the Department of Justice. And I was the only one involved with it. No one else in my firm. My firm actually didn't even know about it. And just came forward right away. I started working with Justin the day one I got the call from the SEC. And I got a guidelines. My plea was 41 to 51 months for securities fraud and wire fraud. And on September 14th, 2.5 weeks ago, I was sentenced to 1 year and a day in Brooklyn Federal Court. And I'm waiting to just...
I can't keep crawling through here. I'm too big.
We've got to meet you, Rob. Go continue, Joseph.
And I'm just waiting designation now. I'm pretty sure my surrender date is November 17th. And my lawyer just got back to me this morning. He didn't hear anything yet about where I'll be placed.
So your question, you said that you had a question. So first of all, just a really quick recap. Joe was expecting a really long sentence. He prepared himself well. He ended up with a sentence far less than what he would have expected, and now he's waiting for designation. And Joseph, you said that you had a question. Let me respond to your question.
Being you're in cramped quarters with half a dozen people or 5, 6 other people, if someone does something wrong, does that affect everyone around? That who you're bunked with, or let's say I'm bunked, the bottom bunk, someone above me does something, do they net everyone in when something happens like that? So
I'm going to give my response to that. I'd love to hear how David and Scott respond if they want to. My response, Joseph, is that you've got to go into prison with this mindset of saying, okay, there's going to be complications all around me. And as one of the concepts of today's webinar is to keep your eyes open. You've heard me say this before about being a submarine. Go through this thing with saying, okay, I've got to stay under the current of what's going on, but I've got my periscope up and I'm going to see what's going on around me. And then I can make better decisions of how do I get through this? Okay. So yes, there's a possibility that people around you are going to have a problem or going to create a problem. But there's something you can do. Like you can control your plan. Like the day you get there, Joseph, I know you've already put your release plan together. The first time you meet with the unit team, you can say, I'm determined to get through this system in the best way possible. I want to be like David, who went and got a job right away. I'd like to work. I'm going to go through programs and I'm going to avoid problems. And I'm going to keep apprising you on the work I've done along the way during every team meeting, because I want to live transparently and just get through here as easy as I can. Give that level of openness and transparency and commitment to excellence from the very start. And what you're doing is you're like setting a tone that I think other people will respond to. When you get into that prison, if you find that the people around you are not sharing that same mindset, you don't want to tell on them, but you want to go to the staff and say, I think in my preparations for success upon release, I'd really like to move to this bunk. I found I was able always to do that, whether I was in a high security penitentiary, a medium, a low, or a minimum. Sometimes I had to be patient, but I could always get it done. And I think that other people can too. I don't know about Scott and David, but both of them seem to have had successful journeys in there. What was your experience in getting placed in the right environment?
For me, it's a matter of who are you surrounding yourself with daily. And like you said, Michael, it's a very dense environment and you can't avoid everyone, but you'll find you spend more time with certain people. You have two types of inmates when it comes to really long sentences. People who are saying, I'm here for such a long time, I don't care about anything. I'm going to do what I want. And other people that say, I've been here for such a long time, I do not want to do anything that's going to keep me here longer than necessary. I started to develop friendships with guys like that. And what will happen is, I know David said he was in a room with 6 people on one side, 6 on the other. I was in a room with 8. Someone will leave the prison, and I was invited to move into their bunk and live with guys like this. So by the end of my sentence, in my room of 8 people, no one wanted to do anything that got them in trouble. We enjoyed each other's company. It became very easy for me to avoid disciplinary infractions. You just need to put a little bit of effort into it and align yourself with the right folks.
I see Brian has a hand up. Brian, go ahead and unmute yourself and share what it is you wanted to say, or if you had a question.
Yeah, so I served my time in McCreary at the camp. Now, what they did there at McCreary is they did group punishments. So if someone in the unit of 75 guys got caught with a cell phone and they did not come forward, if they found a phone and someone did not come forward, we did not have commissary for 30 days.
Oh, the whole unit?
The whole unit.
Oh.
So let's stay on what that means. They did group punishments. That is very different. And thank you for sharing that, Brian. But that's very different from a disciplinary infraction. Prison's uncomfortable. Prison is difficult, and you've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And we actually have a whole series of articles and things on our website that helps you understand that. What I'm talking about is what can complicate your life and make it so you don't get out of prison early. I want you to understand this disciplinary code so that you can avoid it. Sure, there's going to be all types of discomforting events that happen in there, always. But what you have to be thinking about is, how do I keep my disciplinary record clean so that it doesn't influence my pattern score? Okay, because your pattern score could actually have an influence on when you get out of prison, or so that it's not going to take away your good time, or so that it's not going to complicate your ability to get to home confinement at the soonest possible time. So what I'd love to do now is to go back to this portion of saying, how do I do that? It all starts with understanding. And understanding means, well, how does the whole thing work? How do staff members issue a disciplinary infraction, and why would they? Okay. So it's important to understand any staff member wants to advance his or her career, just like if you're in business, you want to advance your career. So if people want to advance their career, they've got to think, how do I do it within the institution? One of the ways they do it is by writing disciplinary infractions. It's something that they are encouraged to do. So if you know, I've got staff members around here who effectively want to meet a quota sometimes, or show we are protecting, what do they call it? Protecting security of the institution. If you understand that, that should influence your decisions. But you should also say, okay, well, they have to follow, just like I have to follow rules, they have to follow rules. Now, they don't always do it, but the policy requires them to follow rules. And that means if somebody's going to issue a disciplinary infraction, they are supposed to do it within 24 hours of the time they become aware of a problem. Okay? So if time passes and they don't become aware of it, but they do become aware of it later, that's a complication for you. And you've got to know how to handle that. And I'm going to give an example of what I'm talking about. But the process is that as soon as a staff member understands or believes that an infraction has occurred, they have, by policy, 24 hours to write the infraction. Think of it as you're going down the freeway and a police officer sees you going 80 miles an hour in a 55. He's got to write that infraction when he catches you. Okay. But if they have one of those cameras or some new technology out and it catches you and you've gone 3 or 4 days later, you learn that you got a ticket from some technological reason, they can do it that way too. So it's when the institution, they have this rule that says it has to be within 24 hours, but that does not absolve you of being all free much later in your sentence. So one time, I'll give you an example. One time when I was in prison, I was accused of breaking into, I got called to the what's called the lieutenant's office to respond to a disciplinary infraction. I didn't know what happened. They just called me and they said, do you know why you're here? That's always their first question. And they eventually told me, well, we think that you broke into a housing unit. This was like in March. We think you broke into a housing unit back in January, tapped into the staff member's phone system and made an unauthorized phone call. You're looking at that saying, how do you defend yourself against an accusation like that? I mean, I didn't know. It's like saying, and that's what I told him. I said, you're like saying I broke out of prison last month and went to New York, because I was in New Jersey at the time, went to New York, and then I broke back into prison, and now I've got to tell you that I didn't do it. And he said, you've been charged with the infraction. It's on you to prove you didn't do it. That's part of prison. Okay. But that kind of thing, that kind of infraction could really disrupt my life. It could have meant that I never went to a camp. It would have blocked me from using the phone for about a year. It would influence my security scoring. There's just a parade of horribles that can follow. The way that I got through it is exactly what Scott said, exactly what David said, is I was very methodical in keeping a journal of everything I did every day in prison. And because I knew that when they gave me the disciplinary infraction 2 months ago, I was able to go to my journal and I was able to say, why would they say I broke into another housing unit and tapped into a phone, into a staffed phone line? It's because the staff members are doing things that you don't know about, okay, all the time. They're listening to your phone calls. They're reading the emails that you send. They're photographing the mail that comes in, and they're learning everything about your life. And you don't know that this is happening, but it's going on every single day. And what happened in my case was that when you use the phone in prison, you've got to give the list of the numbers that you are going to call. And some staff member who was really excited about advancing his career and looking to write disciplinary infractions took it upon himself, good for him, to audit any phone numbers that a staff member made that went to a person in prisons, somebody on their phone list. And they saw that that one staff member's phone call had called my wife, Carol, back in January. And they assumed that I must have tapped into that guy's line and used his phone. I wouldn't know how to tap into a phone line anywhere. But the job was for me to defend myself. How did I do it? I went back to my journal. I saw, Carol, my wife, Carol, called the institution that day, and the unit manager called him back. So now I had to track down that unit manager, who by then had already transferred to a different prison, and get him to acknowledge, yes, I made that call, not the inmate. Me, I'm the inmate. So if I didn't have that journal, I can tell you I would have had a serious disciplinary infraction. It was a 200 series shot, meaning, and incidentally, shot is the vernacular for a disciplinary infraction. So I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't break any rule, but I got charged with an infraction, and the burden was on me to overcome it. Just like you may do everything right in prison, but that doesn't mean there's not going to be a problem. You've got to know how to respond if there is a problem. And that's why I started this webinar by showing you the disciplinary code and said, please read it. But I will also say, please ask us questions. If I'm not being clear on something, on why something is important, please ask a question. Either unmute yourself or drop it in the chat, and I will respond to that afterwards. I know that as I'm talking here, my wife, Carol, has something to contribute. What is it? Louder. I can't do that. So let me continue. I want you to be, I would love to hear what you have to say. Drop me a text or something, because I'll lose focus. Besides the disciplinary infraction and the importance of understanding this system, make sure that you know what you can do. You could always ask for what's called an informal resolution. Okay? An informal resolution is you're offering to say, look, I don't want it. I'm not going to say that I did something wrong, but I want to know, is there a possibility for me to resolve this informally? Okay. Is there some type of extra duty that I can do? Because I want you to start by always thinking about, how do I satisfy what the staff member is trying to accomplish? The staff member is trying to, I guess, populate his record of work, of doing good work product for the institution. So if he gives you extra duty or something along those lines, he still gets the benefit of saying, I've got my eye on the institution, but you get the benefit of not having to go through the whole process of getting a disciplinary infraction, getting a sanction, having it go against you in your central file. I want you to understand everything about this process. And if you read the disciplinary code, you will learn a little bit more about alternative sanctions, and you may be able to avoid the problem. It's also very important to be thinking about all the people around you. You are absolutely going to see a level of injustice around you. You are going to see staff members that are not always doing what their superiors would want them to do. And it may happen to somebody else, and maybe you're a person that wants to intervene and help your fellow person in prison. Please remember, that's not your job. Your job is to get home to your family as soon as you possibly can, and to be that submarine, not to advocate for other people, not to disrupt the machine, but to get out. If you want to get out and you want to come back home and resume your life with your family, and then want to join us and become advocates for the whole system, great. Maybe there are opportunities for us to do that together. But while you're in there, please remember, you are in their, you have to look at this not from your eyes, not from your family's eyes, but from the system's eyes. And from the system's eyes, you are there to serve a sentence, not to save anyone else. Because if you do that, you're going to make yourself more vulnerable to your own problems. We want you to avoid problems. And that's what this whole webinar series is about, is getting you to ask questions and to understand everything you say on the phone, every email you send out, every piece of mail you put in the mail, everything somebody writes you is potentially going to be scrutinized, not only by correctional officers who are going through their time trying to advance their career, right? Anybody who's a correctional officer, he wants to get to the next level of his career. He wants to go from being a GS5 correctional officer, where he's earning $20 an hour, to being a GS7, where he earns $25 an hour, to becoming a lieutenant, to becoming a captain. And he wants to advance his career. And you, my friend, have to remember when you're going in there that you are the tool that will help him advance his career. The more you understand about that, the more you could say, okay, I've got to put myself in an algorithm like Scott and Dave said they did, or like even Brian. Yeah, there's going to be problems. Somebody's going to break a rule. There's going to be mass punishment. Don't be the one that's going to solve the mass punishment and say, this isn't fair, this is injustice, or violating my rights. You've got to choose which battles are worth fighting and which battles just to say, let it go. Okay. It's raining outside today. I'm going to get wet. This is part of prison, is using really good critical thinking skills so that you understand my goal is to get out as soon as I possibly can and have the highest level of liberty as I possibly can. And it's to understand I'm going into an environment that it's not me that's going to say it's got a lot of problems, right? If you look right here, I'm going to go to Chrome. I'm going to try and share. And, oh, shoot, that's the wrong one. If you look, let me go back again. I'm sorry, I got to share the screen. If you look at this part of our website, isn't this the web? No, it's not the web. I'm going to close that. Oh, here it is. If you look at our website right here, and you go to this section here, blog, and you click on this yesterday's article, okay, you are going to see a link to the Senate Judiciary Committee that is
the guy is good.
I'm sorry, I can't see who's not muted, but please mute yourself so that we preserve the good recording. But if you look at this webinar right here, this video, you're going to see a series of things that the Congress is working on the Bureau of Prisons with, and you're going to hear from the director of the Bureau of Prisons who's talking about some of the challenges that they have right now. They have challenges with staffing. And because they have challenges with staffing, they're doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. Not probably, they're saying that they're not doing. And it's making it harder on you, on people like you. But your job right now isn't to fight that machine. When you come home, if you want to fight that machine and join our team, that's really what my job is. I mean, if you're working on this webinar, you've probably worked with other members of our team and not so much with me. But that's my job, is to go into prisons and try and talk with legislators and policymakers and help them understand, what do we need to do to make prisons better? If I were to do that when I was in prison, and I did, I knew that I could go to the hole. I knew that I could get transferred. I got transferred from prisons across state lines many times during my experience, but it was different for me than it is than for any of you, because all of you have a good shot of getting home relatively soon. So don't go in there and become the person that's going to solve all the problems. You've got to understand that system before you surrender. And understanding that system, really, in my view, a big part of that is understanding the disciplinary code. So on this disciplinary code, I'm going to share the screen again and kind of go through the slides. Am I sharing? I'm not sharing. I want to go through the slides because I want you to know where to go and look for information on your own. You've got to know if there's an investigation going on, what's going to happen. Well, if an officer charges you with an infraction because he sees it, for example, you're bringing food out of the chow hall and you don't think it's a big deal, right? In your view, I'm just bringing my apple out of the chow hall. And some institutions won't matter. Some staff members will say, well, there's a rule that says you can't bring anything out of the chow hall, and they could charge you with stealing. And stealing is a 200 series shot. And you could litigate your way out of that problem, but it doesn't mean that you're going to win. You only win is if you avoid it in the very beginning. And although you cannot control what other people are going to do, you can always control what you're going to do. And so remember, if there is a call for you to see a lieutenant, remember what's going to happen and don't freak out over it. Just say, okay, I know this can happen to me. I got to know, how do I respond? What are they going to do? But I think the way you avoid it is you follow the guidance that both Scott and David said. Memorialize your journey. Have a plan. Understand there's going to be group punishment. Let's not cry about that. Let's not whine about that. You need to cry that you got targeted for an investigation in the first place. But we can't change that. We can't change the fact that a prosecutor convened a grand jury and they charged you and you had to go and plead guilty or go to trial, and now you're going to prison. All that's in the past. I can't do anything about that. What I can do is tell you, hey, let's focus on getting out of there as soon as I possibly can. And one of the things that you have to know first and foremost is understand how this disciplinary code works, so that you're going to sow seeds from the day you surrender and make it less likely that you are going to get a shot. Minimize that possibility, but if it does happen, know how it starts. There's going to be an accusation by a correctional officer who's going to result in a lieutenant calling you to the lieutenant's office. And there's never a good reason to be called to the lieutenant's office. The lieutenant is like the head of security. And they have a lot of interaction and a lot of tentacles going out throughout the prison. So understand that from the day you get there. There are going to be people who have been there a long time before you got there. And those people may not all be upfront and honorable and honest. Okay? That's just a fact. Some of them may be wanting to advance their own agenda, and they do that by making accusations against others, and that can result in a problem. There can be things going on in other parts of the country that have nothing to do with you, but you can get targeted. So understand what will happen if you are targeted. You'll get called to the lieutenant's office. They will ask you if you understand what's going to happen, and you've got to know what to do. So make sure that when they say they're going to read the charge against you, but you should know every single charge that they could potentially charge against you. You won't know that unless you go read the disciplinary code. So if you read the whole disciplinary code over this week and you come on next week's webinar and you have questions, ask me about them. But there are disciplinary codes for everything. So understand them and ask questions so that you could better prepare yourself against getting a disciplinary code. But if you get one, please make sure that you say, I would like to respond, first of all, informally. Is there any possibility that could resolve this informally with extra duty or something along those lines? And if you can, take it, because that's like an exit. And that's an exit. That's getting off the process. If you don't ask, well, you don't know if that was a possibility. If you respond in the wrong way to the lieutenant, it's going to have more adverse things against you. So if he says no, informal resolution is not an option, then say, may I please respond in writing? I'd rather write out my responses. I know that this is a very important time in my journey, and I try to abide by all rules. So could you please give me an hour to write out my response, because that will become a part of the record. And if you have to defend yourself against a disciplinary infraction, you want to have a written response. Okay. But if you don't understand the disciplinary code, you may not know what to write to protect yourself. So please read the disciplinary code, understand it. And then when you're writing, remember every word is a part of the record. So be very cautious of what you're writing. But in my experience, you are far better off to advocate for yourself if you write. And then second, if you have a witness that can exonerate you, make sure that you ask for the witness at that time, because prison is very much a bureaucracy. If you don't follow this process at the right time, you lose the opportunity to do it later. Okay? Everything is procedural in the Bureau of Prisons. Everything is a process. It's all driven by policy. They're going to give you a shot. They're going to call you to the lieutenant's office, or they're going to lock you in the hole right away, and then the lieutenant will come and see you. But that process is going to follow. First, somebody accuses you of something wrong. A lieutenant calls you. He's going to read the infraction. He's going to say your Miranda rights. Okay. Don't freak out over all of that, because it's just part of the process. It's what they do, because this is a quasi-legal proceeding, and they're going to say you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. They will say that, just like they've said it to you before. Don't freak out over that. It's just part of the process. I'm assuming that you're not doing anything wrong, of course. So understand that's their job. The next thing that's going to happen is they're going to say, do you have anything to say? They would love to write down there, no, I didn't do it. They would love to just write that. They would love to write whatever you're going to say out of your mouth. But it would be far better for you if you were to say, number one, is there a possibility of resolving this in an informal resolution? That's the first thing that you should say. If they say no, I'm going to send this to the unit team for processing, then you've got to say, then please allow me to write a formal response that will become a part of the record. Now, when you say that, all that you've done is you've created a little bit more work for that lieutenant, but you've also protected yourself. And that's why I asked you in the beginning, start this whole concept by remembering who works in the Bureau of Prisons. What do they want? If they want to advance their career, they may very well do that on your back. So make sure that you're protecting yourself by, first of all, learning about the disciplinary code. And then second of all, learn how to respond. Hopefully this never happens to you, that you never get a disciplinary infraction. I never got a disciplinary infraction in 26 years that stuck. That doesn't mean I didn't get a disciplinary infraction. I got charged a lot of times with disciplinary infractions, but because I prepared myself well, none of them stuck. Okay. Actually, one of them did stick. I got charged one time for giving something of value to somebody else. And when I was in my 14th or 15th year of prison. But I don't want that to happen to you. I want you to know the way you protect yourself is you memorialize your journey. Okay. The other thing you have to know is, what are the different disciplinary infractions? So it says them all in the code, and you could look at your inmate handbook and you will see them again. But I'm just going to tell you off the top of my head what they are. There are 4 different series of disciplinary infractions. Okay. The first and worst is called the 100 series disciplinary infraction. I don't expect that any of you will ever get a disciplinary infraction of a 100 series. That would be something like drinking or smoking weed or using a cell phone or, having a weapon. Those are very serious, and they generally result in a referral to the U.S. Attorney's Office for further prosecution. Okay. So these things happen in prison, not so much in camps, except that in camps, there is a tremendous amount of contraband. And so there's going to be cell phones there. There's going to be liquor there. There's going to be drugs there. Okay. And you have to have the discipline to make sure you not only don't use any of those things, but you don't associate with people that are involved in those things. Scott, did you see a lot of contraband in the camp where you were?
There was not as much contraband at our camp in Yankton as there were at other camps. Inmates from other facilities were saying that, where they came from, it was just ripe with drugs and alcohol and cell phones. Our facility had a very high number of COs to inmate population, and they were exceptionally swift and aggressive with the punishments. So people were well behaved. Again, inmates coming from other prisons were kind of surprised at the difference. But I think it just goes to show you never know what it will be like when you get there. But the resounding factor is the punishments are swift and harsh for things that may feel minor in the time.
Yeah. And so I'm going to guess that a lot of Scott's preparation is one of the reasons that he didn't see a lot of that contraband, because it's there. If you want to find it, it's there. Yankton camp is a special kind of camp because there's no adjacent prison or penitentiary. So everybody there is minimum security. The staff are all only work in minimum security. Most camps are adjacent to a higher security prison, and the people in the camp a lot of times provide labor for the higher. They don't mix with the people in higher security, but they may go mow the lawns in there. They may do the laundry in there. They may do other work and so on in there. So anytime there's that kind of movement, there's potential for problems. I just want you to be aware of it and avoid it, but because they can in camps, there is a lot of these kinds of problems that can result in not only making you serve a longer time in prison, but can potentially result in a recommendation to the Department of Justice on another criminal charge. I've known a lot of people that got charged with new crimes while they were in prison for either gambling or running a cell phone ring or drinking or trying to leave the camp to go meet their wife offline. There's just a lot of things. So the more you know, the better you are going to protect yourself. And what are the consequences of this? If you get a disciplinary infraction, it's going to influence your custody and classification system first. Okay. It's going to result in changing your custody status from being minimum to very likely being low. It will definitely influence your ability to earn time credits, which can translate into either you getting out of prison and going to home confinement earlier, or even reducing your sentence. So there's a lot of implications there. This is a very high pain point that very few people understand before they get there. So I really want you to be thinking about this before you get there. And that means to go through the code and learn about the code. Then there are the sanctions, the immediate local sanctions. Going to segregated housing unit is a potential sanction. Losing your commissary is a potential sanction. Losing your phone privileges, email privileges, visiting privilege is a potential sanction. Having to live in a solitary cell that's designed to be solitary, but you might be sharing it with two other people. So there are a lot of complications that follow a disciplinary code, but there's also something to remember about the realities of living in prison. In every prison, there is one of these, okay, that I'm showing on the screen. Every prison, there's an underground economy, okay? And it's your job as somebody who's going in there to keep your eyes open and understand that this exists. And you've got to really use your critical thinking skills on figuring out, what am I going to do? What am I not going to do? And I'm not going to tell anybody what to do, but I will say this. I was not a model inmate in prison. Okay. While I was going through 26 years in prison, my only focus was getting out of prison successfully because I had a really long sentence. So I was willing to do things that might put me in a little bit higher risk category. But it was because I was focused on an end goal. I want you to define success for your life, but understand prison. There's going to be people there that have been there before you, and they may not all be, completely logical. There will be people that take an ownership interest in a certain area. For example, the laundry room. This is an area that is always kind of a potential for an underground economy to exist. Is it the end of the world if you have somebody else do your laundry? No. In fact, it may be the smarter thing to do, because in the prison, typically there's going to be, say, in a camp, I'm just going to use a camp for an example, there may be only 4 washing machines and 4 dryers to satisfy several hundred people. Okay. And there might be a guy there that's been in prison for 7 years or for 15 years or for 20 years. And he's now in the camp, and he doesn't have any resources outside. So the way he supports himself is he'll say, hey, I'll do your laundry for you for $5 a week or whatever, $10 a week. I don't know the going rates in there. Pay me with mackerel, or pay me with stamps, or pay me with this or that. That's the underground economy that exists in every prison. And you might say, oh, I don't want to break any rules. Well, there's other rules that there are collateral consequences that come with every decision you make. If I consider the laundry room to be my territory, it's kind of like a union, non-union thing. Okay. What do you do in there? My advice for me was always to say, I got to get through prison and avoid problems. If this guy runs the laundry room and that's how he defines success in his life, I'm going to give him 10 cans of tuna a week or whatever I have to give him, and do my laundry. And that way I don't have to go in there and mix and interact with everybody fighting for the use of the dryer, because an argument can ensue. Other things can happen. And my job has always been take the path that is going to give me the least exposure to the problems in prison. And that means you've got to think of all of your strengths, all of your weaknesses, all of your opportunities, but you always have to have your head in the game. You always have to know, my only goal is to get out of here as soon as possible. And for me to do that, I got to make sure I have a clean disciplinary record. Because if I don't have a clean disciplinary record, anything else you want to do goes out the table. Okay? Anything else. So understand the system. Understand that you're going to be living with people that you don't know and people that don't know you. And many of those people may be confidential informants for the lieutenant's office, maybe, trying to save themselves by saying, hey, I'm going to tell you everything going wrong in the camp, and you don't know that that's going on. That's just a reality. So I need you to understand the disciplinary code before you get there. And then I need you to say, if I'm going to do everything I can to avoid any problem, but if a problem comes, I know what I have to do. Now, that kind of concludes my prepared remarks on the disciplinary code. What I'm going to do now is go through the chat and respond to everybody who's got a question. But again, this is the time for you to ask questions. So if you have any questions at all, please let me respond to those questions, because I want you to come through this feeling as though you have an advocate and an ally on your side all the way through your journey. But I can't solve the problem for you. I'm not going to be in prison with you. Okay. And although, I'm going to tell you what I can only tell you, this is what I would do if I were in that situation. The first thing I would do is I would work to avoid the problem. But if the problem came, you're going to be, and you're in prison, you won't be able to do these webinars, obviously, but we send information through the email to you every week. There are people on this webinar right now that are part of our community, Clay and Brian. They kind of monitor those emails that come in, and they'll be sending you information inside. If you have to go through administrative remedy or something along those lines, we're going to kind of guide you to the ability that we can. But at the end of the day, prison is a self-service journey. And we've got to make sure that you go in there ready to function. So I just wanted to say that in the beginning. Now I want to go through here and look at all of the questions. So Lawrence asked if David did RDAP. He did not do RDAP. David just had a 24-month sentence. He was successful in being released through the CARES Act, which we've spoken about the CARES Act. We'll be talking about it more in future webinars, but David did not do RDAP. My friend Scott did do RDAP, and that resulted in a really successful outcome for him. I see another question here about home confinement. You couldn't leave your house. You can, but the preparations you do in advance are going to influence your experience on home confinement and how quickly you can get there. They allow you to leave. Scott, I see you responding. Joe, David, congratulations. Glenn's good morning. Lawrence, Scott, that's awesome. Okay, so how did you decrease your... So Lawrence, I know that Scott's going to respond. I want to talk about decreasing the sentence. So Lawrence, to decrease the sentence is a very specific term. That's a legal term. The only one that can decrease a sentence is a judge. What you can do is position yourself to participate in programs and seize opportunities that can result in you getting out of prison early or earning credits that get applied to your sentence that can result in you finishing your obligation to the BOP. But remember, there are many tentacles here. Once you get sentenced, that's the judge gives you the sentence. Then there are a series of administrative policies that you're trying to position yourself for. I want you to position yourself for the best outcome. Could you unmute yourself, Larry? Is that okay?
Yes, I did.
Larry, I'm going to ask you a question. Are you Larry or Lawrence?
Lawrence.
Okay, Lawrence. I'm Michael. We've never spoken before. I assume you've spoken to members of our team.
To Sam.
Great. Sam is great. And we've got other members of our team. I hope you connect with everybody, but I want you to know one thing about these different policies. You really have to learn about them all. Have you been sentenced already?
No, my arraignment is actually in 3 weeks.
Okay. So your job, Lawrence, is going to be get ready for every series of mitigation strategies going forward, like Joe did, right? Joe thought he was going to get a 50 or 60 month sentence, but he really sowed the seeds before his arraignment, before his pre-sentence investigation, before his sentencing hearing. And then now you can see he's still working. He's learning, what do I do? Because he was thinking he was going to get 50 months. He would have been happy with 36 months. He ends up with a year and a day. So now he's got to be saying, okay, now I got a year and a day. I got to work to get out early from that year and a day. Our hopes are that Joseph comes home in 3 months. Okay. Because there are policies that should allow him to come home in 3 months. Okay. Is it going to happen? I would say that's the best possible outcome, is for him to get out in 3 months. I would say a real victory would be if we could get him out in 6 months. But the worst thing he's going to get, as long as he doesn't get a disciplinary infraction, he'll be home in probably 8 months or so. Okay. So the job is to never stop working and to understand this system. There is a lot of free information on Prison Professors. It's going to be your job to work through it and come back to the webinar and ask more questions. But even after you get sentenced, there are going to be things that you could do while you're in prison that could potentially move the needle in getting you to transition to home confinement early or a residential reentry center early. And then the next webinar, I hope you'll be on, we're going to be talking about the initial adjustment and what should you be doing when you get to prison. But always feel free to ask questions. I'm glad you asked them in the chat.
What I'm struggling with is I've had trouble with drugs, but I'm also worried that I will be sent to a facility that has RDAP, that is not a camp, that is a higher level of security and away from my family. And so I'm really worried about pushing the RDAP strategy or dealing with the way I've been dealing with my recovery on my own, because I know that Inglewood camp does not have RDAP.
Well, Inglewood may not have a RDAP, but I think Florence does. So that's in Colorado as well. I was there at Florence. But, you're really looking, and it's good for you to make these inquiries and learn more about it. There is a lot of that information on the website. And as you get through arraignment, if you're working with Sam, you're going to be working to tee these things up way in advance. Okay. Well, you're a long ways before designation because you have to first get sent. Do you know what your sentencing range is?
24 to 30 months right now.
Okay. So I don't even know if you'll get RDAP, because if you work with our team, we're going to help you get an outcome like Joe, that you get a sentence that's so low that RDAP becomes a moot point and you can avoid it altogether. But you're really early. And I think that's great that you're on the webinars now. I think that you need to learn everything you possibly can so that hopefully you get a sentence of like 18 months. And on the 18, you're going to serve like 9 or 8 or something like that.
Something to chime in with just for you. I think Florence closed their RDAP program. I can't confirm that, but we had a lot of people show up at Yankton from Florence who were about halfway through or had just started.
Okay.
Something to keep in mind. Also, people speak glowingly of Inglewood. It's like almost humorous how many people I was with who had great things to say about the Inglewood camp.
Yeah. So there's so many things for you to learn, Lawrence. We're not going to cover them all in this 1 hour, or we're already longer than an hour, but please keep coming back. But don't only spend time on the webinar, spend time on all the articles at prisonprofessors.com. There's a lot of videos that you should be watching, including the videos that we've done with leaders of the Bureau of Prisons. And there's a lot of things that you should be learning before you go. Okay.
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay. I see. Is that Sam Haj? I see that you raised your hand. Did you have a question? Was there another question somebody had? I thought I saw somebody's hand raise up. Yeah. Do you know how to wait a second. You got to unmute yourself if you're talking. Let me see if I can unmute you.
Okay, there we go. I think I'm muted.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. Hi, Michael. I wish I would have found you long time ago. I'm actually going to be turning myself in on the 7th, next Friday, to Mendota.
Mendota. Okay.
In Fresno. So I just have a few questions for you.
Sure.
I mean, I know there's probably prison camps better than others. I mean, how would you compare that facility that I'm going to be going to?
So when you're asking me that question, I'm going to tell you all the camps are the same. Okay. If you're asking me.
Yeah.
And let me tell you why. I have a different perspective than somebody who's only been in one prison and only knows one thing, right? But you've heard that analogy before. It's always greener on the other side of the fence.
Of course.
Okay. And wherever you go, you're going to hear people there saying, "Oh, Mendota's terrible. This is going to happen." I'm going to send you a link to somebody who's there that I just happened to have found. In fact, let me see if I could find it right now on the web, because I want you to see it. So here's a guy that's like the people, and I don't know this guy, by the way, but now you can see my thing. Let me see, Adams State University. Let me see this. Program for the Incarcerated. I think this is where I was looking. Let me see. Adams State University Program for Prisoner. Let me see if this is it. Yes, this is it. I was looking for college programs for people in prison, and I saw this guy who is a success story here, and he's writing about his experience, and he's in Mendota, and he's been in prison for a long time. and he has really distinguished himself and built a life. If I can't find it right now, I won't spend the whole time looking through the site.
That's okay.
But I'm going to send it to you because here's what I think you should do. Okay. If you know you're going to Mendota on Friday, have you worked with other members of our team?
I've been talking to Sam, and honestly, I found you guys just like a few days ago.
Okay, that's okay.
And,
Let me
we've been
see.
talking a little bit, and I'm only going for 8 months too. So
8 months is a long time. You're
It
away
is,
from
yeah.
your family.
I
Okay.
know.
Let's try to make it as easy as we can for you. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out and see, do we know anybody at Mendota so that they can welcome you when you get there? That'll be the first thing that I'm going to do.
Okay.
And the second thing I'm going to do in an email, we're going to send you some books. So as soon as you get there, they will be coming to you and they will kind of help you along this journey. Because yes, 8 months is only, but anytime you're away from your family, you've got to be, you've got to be planning for it. The other thing you got to be thinking about doing is what happens to your life when you come home. Okay. What kind of career do you do? How does this follow you along? How do you get the highest level of liberty while you're on supervised release? Okay. All of these things, the decisions you make in prison are going to have an influence on that. And we want to make sure that we're helping you get that insight while you're there. So please look through the website this week to learn more, watch the videos, listen to the audios, because you're going to learn a lot.
Right.
And it doesn't sound like you'll be able to be on the webinar again, but we're doing this again tomorrow. It'll be a repeat really of what I just said today, but you're more than welcome to do it. And if you spend time learning today, you may have more questions tomorrow that we could answer for you.
Just a few more questions, like quick questions. So one of them would be like, is there a look-wise, like, I have a beard, and all that. Is there like, should I like shave it? Should I like go look more? I mean, is there? No,
I think you should be yourself. You're okay. You look great to me. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. And then, so with the 8 months, I know, I know it's like if a year and a date, you can cut it down to something. But for me, since I'm like below that year period, I mean, what's realistically, if I do everything you guys talked about, prepare and have everything in order, I mean, what's my chances like maybe doing a home confinement, like after 4, 5, 6 months, or is it?
I think they're pretty good. Okay. But let's just kind of look at this little tool we have that I'm so grateful to my friend Brian, who's our wizard, and we've been building this calculator to help people answer questions like that. So this is the newest version of it. Let's go up here and plug in your information. You have an 8-month sentence,
correct?
And you're surrendering on what day?
October 7th.
Let's just see what it says. 22. And did you spend any time in custody so far?
No.
So you just pleaded guilty?
Yes.
Okay. According to this, the worst case is you're going to get out on June the 6th, 23. That's the worst possible case.
Yeah, right. Yes. That 8 months. Yeah.
Okay. But you are going to potentially be earning, you don't earn good time, right. And you are not going to be able to advance your release date from the Bureau of Prisons, but you can earn these credits that can result in you going to home confinement sooner. Okay. So you want to, and there's also the CARES Act, which is still the law. And you look pretty healthy to me, but they may, they may let you go to home confinement just because they want to reduce the population level, and you'd be eligible to do that in 2 months. It's very unlikely that it would happen before 3 months, but I think it's possible that I think you should be saying the best case for me is going to be I would go to home confinement in 3 months. That's the best case. And that would be under CARES Act, because you can't, by law, you can only do the last 10% of your time on home confinement if they let you out under the Second Chance Act. They can send you to what's called a halfway house. Okay. They can send you there, but you can only do 10% of your time on home confinement.
So you're 10%. So 10% out of 8 months, that's we're talking about like
about 80 days.
80
About what?
days? No.
8 months? No, 8 months is 10%.
240 days. So
Right.
it's 10 to 24 days.
Yeah, that's it for home confinement. But,
Oh, wow.
but under the First Step Act,
Right.
you can earn these credits that override the Second Chance Act.
Okay.
So look, you only have 5 days to prepare for all this. I'm going to give you the really simplest thing you've got to do. Make sure you don't get a disciplinary infraction. That's your highest priority.
Right.
Second, do you have a fine?
I have a restitution that I have to pay. Yes.
Okay.
Is that what you mean by fine?
It could be either or any type of financial thing. How much is your restitution?
550,000.
So it's too much for you to just pay. How much do you
Right.
think you're going to live on in prison? Money. Are you going to send money to yourself in prison?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, absolutely.
How much do you think you'll send to yourself in prison every month?
I mean, $300 to $500 a month, or I mean,
Okay.
more
I'm
or
gonna give
less.
you-
I mean, I
I'm gonna-
have people that can help me financially to do that. So,
Okay, so here's my recommendation to you. Okay, because this is very important in the Bureau of Prisons right now. Financial responsibility program. They're getting a lot of heat from Congress on this. If you watch that webinar I published yesterday, you'll see they're talking about financial responsibility. So what they are not going to what is it? What is your name? First name?
my name is Samir. Samir.
Okay, Samir. What they are not going to want to see is you're getting $500 sent into you every month and you're not doing something to pay restitution. Okay? So when you go there, you're going to say, I've got a big fine. I wish I could pay it now. I can't, but my family and friends are going to send me money. I'd like to sign up for something to have a portion of that money go towards my restitution. Just be the first one to say it. Don't make them come to you for that, because that's going to differentiate you from everybody else. Okay. You've got to realize what influences you getting out early are a few things. One, no disciplinary infractions. Two, you've got to have a participation in financial responsibility program. And three, participate in every class that's available. Okay? I don't care how stupid the class is to you. Go to the class. Okay? Do whatever they ask.
Yes.
Because you want them to become your advocate and help you get out early.
Quick thing. I was losing you. The connection was I'm losing you. So you said what's the financially?
You're supposed to be paying towards your restitution,
Right.
but that's a voluntary program.
Okay.
If you don't do it, it's going to hurt your ability to get out early, though. They call it voluntary, but if you're on refusal status, you're going to suffer. So just say, look, I don't have much money, but my family's going to send me money to live in here. Could I come up with some type of arrangement with you that I pay a portion of that every month? And they'll say, yes, that will help you.
Okay. So like, for example, if I'm getting 500, I'll say, maybe 200 goes to that restitution.
You would be amazing if you did that. They would think you're the most incredible guy there if you said that, because everybody else is going to say, I'm getting 500. Is it okay if I pay $25 a month? Right? Okay. Yeah. That doesn't look good. If you're getting, what I don't want you to do is overcommit. Once you commit, you got to make sure you have the money in the bank to pay them.
Yes.
Because otherwise they'll go on refusal status. It's automatic. So like say, just take, if you said $100 a month, I think I can afford to pay $100. Would that be acceptable? They're going to think you're great. So just tell them that off the bat. Could I sign up for $100? My family's going to send me money. I just like $100 of that to go to the account.
And I don't know. Is that something when I go in with my
if you say it when you go in during that first day, they're going to come and talk. Oh, you're not going to be on next week's webinar. If you say it the first day you surrender, they're going to come and see you. When you see the case manager, if you say, I'd like to sign up for the financial responsibility program. My family said they're going to send me like 150. You can take $100 of that, right? And then they could send you more. That's fine. But all you want to be is the guy that's, I'm responsible. That really helps you.
Okay, so the first day when I go there, I'll say, you know what, they're gonna send me some money. I'm committing to put $150, for example, to my restitution. Or
yeah, that's $100. You're going to be you're going to be in the top 1% of the camp. I'll tell you that right now.
Okay, $100. So
yeah,
okay.
That's fine. That way you don't hurt yourself. Okay.
Right. Well, how much do you need? Like a month of on my account,
don't build the account up too high, because I used to say keep several thousand in there. Yeah. But based on the congressional testimony that I heard yesterday, I can see that they're going to be pushing the BOP much harder on financial responsibility. So I wouldn't keep a high balance. I would say it costs to live in prison in all reality. From 250 to 500, you could live pretty well.
Okay. So the first day, or because they can't send money until I get there, right? Mm-hmm. So what's a good amount for them to send?
500 is plenty.
500, and I can commit $100 up of that.
Yeah.
To my financial responsibility.
Yeah, and then say I can do that every month.
Okay, I can do that every month because
every time the account gets to below 300, have them send you more money.
Okay, because I was speaking with Sam and he said, if I would, for example, take the courses and do the work, start working right away, that could help also with me, getting out early on home confinement.
Yes,
as well.
Work is very important in there.
Yeah, he thought that I could be out in 3 months because I
think that's the very, very best case, though, Samir. Let's manage expectations.
I'm not being optimistic. I'd rather be realistic. 4 or 5 months.
That's the very best case. But let's go for the best case and be very happy if you get out in 5 or 4. Mm-hmm. Okay. And make sure you put us on our list. We'll give you a list that when you get there, so that you can communicate with our team. Okay.
Okay, perfect. And also, I probably should have a landline too, where I'm going to say I'm going to be staying as well. Would that be correct?
Actually, according to our subject matter expert, that's no longer the rule. You can go home and just have a cell phone.
Okay.
They're moving into the modern times.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. You'll be hearing from us through core links when you're there.
Okay. Perfect.
All right.
And if you can send me the information for that person that was in.
Yeah, I'm going to look for it. I'll find him. I see some other people have their hands up. Is it okay if I turn to them now?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. William, you can unmute yourself, William.
Hi.
Hi.
I had a question. I put it in the chat, but I know it's easy to get lost there.
Yeah, there's a lot. So please, just go ahead and unmute yourself. What can I do for you?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine.
Okay. I qualified for the 5K, where the minimum guidelines or whatever, the judge can go below that.
Yeah.
I have also just now learned, no one has said this to me, my lawyer or the prosecutor, that I also qualify for the safety valve, which on its own would allow the judge to go below the minimum on the sentencing guidelines. So I'm wondering if the two together help, or if it's just a matter of the minimum gets suspended and the judge can go below it regardless.
William, that's a big question that I think I am glad you asked that question. What do you do for a living?
I'm a sailor.
A sailor. Okay. I don't know anything about sailing, so I can't use that as an analogy. But here's what I want you to think about. If you have not been sentenced yet, you're about to make the biggest sale of your life. Okay. You're selling yourself to get the highest level of liberty at the soonest possible time. And every single thing you do is going to influence that outcome. Everything. So if you're getting a 5K, that means you're cooperating with the government, and that's going to play in your favor. If you're also getting the safety valve, that's just a legal thing that says that if you've never been committed of a crime, if you don't have violence, if you are cooperating with the government and the government recognizes that you qualify for the safety valve, yes, they can go below a mandatory minimum, but you can do a lot more. You've got to build your own case with a lot of work. But that question is really long. I could do a whole webinar on that. Here's what I'm going to recommend you do. make sure that you look through all of our sentencing webinars on prison professors. Make sure do you work with somebody in our company? Because this isn't my area, but do you work with somebody in our company, Sam or Justin or who?
I've spoken to Justin before, and I've been on the webinars before listening.
So make sure that you talk with them and you learn about what other people do. Because if you listen to some of the previous webinars, you'll hear from what Scott did, what Joseph did. You should reach out and talk to Scott. These are things that you should be thinking about as you go forward, because you're in a very important stage of your life. And the more you work, the better off you're going to be. So if you connect with Scott, I think he can help you a lot. Scott, are you still on the webinar?
Yep, I'm still here. Just had to jump off to take a phone call real quick.
So it sounds like William hasn't been sentenced yet, and he wants to learn more about what steps he can take besides cooperating and safety valve and other things. And I just thought he should have an offline conversation with you.
Yeah, definitely. You're in a great position, William. I know how nauseating it is, what you're dealing with, but Michael's right. You're at the beginning, and you really have the ability to influence your journey.
So anybody who hasn't been sentenced should really focus on learning everything and then doing everything.
Correct.
What's your email, Scott?
We'll connect. I'll connect you offline.
Michael, I'll get you going.
Yeah. Just connect with Scott,
okay.
or just drop it in the chat, Scott, to him. I'm going to go to the next guy is Ryan.
Sure.
Yeah, Scott, you could just drop it in the chat. Ryan,
okay.
How are you, buddy? Unmute yourself.
I'm good, Michael, and just want to say thanks again for doing these and for all. This is actually going to be my last one because I surrender on Wednesday.
Oh my God. Well, look, you'll be getting some information from us in Corling starting next week as soon as you add us. And I know that my wife would have sent you some books already. What's your question, buddy?
So with mine being a relatively short sentence of 1 year, and on my PSR, I have an approval to go back to my home. Is it, I talked to another gentleman that served at Thompson, and he refused to go to the residential reentry, and he opted to stay at Thompson. Is there any ramifications? His logic was he was more comfortable at Thompson, and the part of Chicago where the RRE center is pretty violent area.
Right.
So is that a battle if I have to go to an RRE? Is it...
So you Ryan, I mean, every person makes his own decision, right? If it were me, I would want to get out of prison and go home. Okay. That's just me. But I was in prison for a long time. So I wanted to get out. Yes. Typically residential reentry centers are not in the best area of town. And when you get to a residential reentry center, you are not, all of a sudden, you're not just with minimum security people, you're with people that come from every security level. I was in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco, which is the highest crime area and in a really bad area of town. But for me, it meant that I got to leave and go to work every day. It meant that I got to eat food in the community. It meant that I got to use a cell phone. It meant that I could see my family. So for me, it was worth it. For other people, I've heard that before too. I'd rather be in prison. In fact, when Scott first got out of prison and went to a halfway house, I think he said the same thing. Scott, how do you feel about that now?
The halfway house made me really appreciate the prison that I was at. However, the points Michael makes are good. If you can get out of prison, leave prison. The halfway house may not be enjoyable. It may not have the amenities. It may not be in a great part of town, but you can see your family. You can get weekend passes. You can eat the food you want. You have access to a cell phone. Leave prison when you can. Just because you're around inmates who come from higher security facilities does not mean they're dangerous people who are going to hurt you. Just like I did at prison, I grew to really like a lot of the guys I was in the halfway house with and enjoyed their company. So everyone has to make their own decision, but when you can leave.
Yeah. I think that is good advice. It's what I would say to people, just because in prison also anything can happen too. right? You could be in the prison and somebody in your cubicle decides to smuggle in weed and you get brought into an investigation. And I mean, just get out of prison. I always say get out of prison, right? And yeah, you're going to be around other people. But I always take the assumption that if you're smart enough to spend your time on a Friday morning being on a webinar like this, that means you're always thinking. And if you're always thinking, you're going to figure out, how do I get out of the halfway house and get the best advantage to get home as soon as possible? And I want to make sure that you do that. So I can't tell you what to do. I can tell you what I would do, and I would get out of prison. I see that there's I see Jonathan has his hand up. Jonathan, can I respond?
Yeah, hi. Can I ask a quick question?
You can ask. Of course you can.
All right, thank you. When it comes to the FRP, do any of these case managers or the people who oversee that, do they look down upon certain people that might have a very large restitution versus someone? I think the gentleman who was speaking said he owes 50,000, but if someone owes 3 million, do they, penalize people for having a larger restitution? Like, oh, this person must have done some really bad shit.
No,
we're not.
Yeah, no. You're okay. Good. It doesn't matter if you have a $5 billion restitution. Okay. And there are people that have that, right? What matters, everything that matters is the record you build in prison. So if you go in there and say, I want to be responsible and I want to contribute to my financial responsibility program, and you're honest about it, and you can only pay $50 a month, that's fine. If you don't have the money, you're not going to get punished for not having the money. You're going to get punished if you're kind of a scam artist. If you've got $1,000 coming in, you say, oh, I don't want to pay $25 a quarter. That's the minimum. That's what I want to sign up for, right? That's going to hurt you. So it's more about being honest and saying, I want to do well and I want to comply, and with both the spirit and the letter of the rules. That's what helps you. So no, your crime is irrelevant. Your behavior in prison is very relevant. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. No other hands are up, but there are more questions in here. Okay, go ahead, Samir. Just unmute yourself.
So just a question, like, about the the laundry and whatnot, like the people that they want to do your things for you. I mean, I'd rather do my own, but are you gonna get into a conflict with those people that they are, like that's my space, but what's the best thing to go around it when you're in there?
Here's the thing: when you're in prison, it's very important to walk in there and the first few days, keep your eyes open. Just kind of look and kind of take the environment in. You're going to find some people who look like you and talk like you and have the same careers as you and the same education as you. And you're going to have a natural bonding in prison. Like Scott said, he had a lot of friends. He'll find friends. You're going to find people that are going to want to welcome you and look out for you. Without a doubt. That'll happen on Friday. As soon as you get there, by that evening, somebody's going to come and offer you things to make your life better. And you're going to ask them, how's the environment here? I just want to make sure I'm respectful of everybody. And as long as you have that mindset, you're going to get through it. Okay. It's just another part of the world, and you're going to get through it. And we'll be sending you information through digital email when you're there and books. But your best information is just going to be using all the skills that have made you successful in other areas of your life. Keep your eyes open. Don't judge anyone. Be very understanding. I'm here for 8 months. I want to get out. And that's going to help you. Please, if somebody else has a question, there's so many things in the chat, I can't even look at them all. Just unmute yourself so I could answer. If not, bring your question tomorrow or bring your question next week, because we've been on for, I know, a long time already, but I want to just give everybody a chance if anybody has a question.
Michael, I've got a question.
Okay.
Going back to what you just said, that you'll find some people that'll help you, give you some stuff. I was told by somebody else to not accept anything for free because everything has an interest or a price on it.
You know, that's true in some prisons. First of all, Rob, you know, I was in prison for 26 years and I was in every security level. And in high security and medium security is very different from minimum security and low security. Very, very different. Okay. That's just start and remember that. When you get to, what do you do in the world, Rob?
Well, right now I'm a stay-at-home dad.
But what did you do in your career? What was your life?
Sales.
So you're in sales. So you have to read people. Okay. If you're in sales and you were successful, you're an expert at reading people. Okay. Do that when you get to prison. Just read your environment and figure out where I am. I can tell you, if I would have met you and you walked into prison, within 3 minutes, you would know I'm not there to hurt you. I'm only there to help you. Just like I am right now. You're going to get that sense because you've got a sense of knowing, hey, who's here trying to scam me or trying to take advantage of me? And if I tell you, hey, it's pretty simple here. Don't worry about it. It's going to be cool. You're going to get through it. I know it's tough. You probably need some shower shoes. I got an extra pair. Take them. Give them back if you want. If you can't afford to give them back, don't give them back. Just keep them. Just make it through here. If you have any questions, just ask me. Right? That type of interaction you are going to have when you get to prison, and when you do, it's gonna remove some of the anxiety that you have. But I just believe that if you're in sales, you don't have that problem. Are you going? What's your sentence length?
I haven't been sentenced yet.
Then if you haven't been sentenced yet, learn through all of our webinars, can keep coming, educate yourself as much as you can. In fact, next webinar is specifically about that. The first day, the first initial adjustment. I think it'll be very relevant to you and to anybody else who has not gone, has a lot of time to prepare. So make sure that you're on next week's webinar.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. Is there anybody else? Because I have a dentist appointment in 15 minutes. So I got to go. But I will be here tomorrow. And if you're all welcome to be back tomorrow. But we've been on for quite a while. I just want to thank everybody. Thank Scott and Brian and is Clay gone already? Clay's gone. But thanks so much for everybody. We love you guys for being a part of our community, and we're going to do our best to prove worthy of the trust you've placed in us. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend. Bye.